Okay, and welcome to solving non-factorable quadratics. Now, in my opinion, this is where the math gets kind of fun because you're going to have to do a couple of things, but whenever you start to solve these, you're going to feel very accomplished. Also, I want to make a quick note that this method always works. What I'm about to teach you, this method always works. So even if something is factorable and you want to use this method, doesn't matter. Whether it's factorable or non-factorable, this method always works. So here we go. How do you solve something that's non-factorable? Well, one, we want to complete the square. So this thing that we've been doing in every single video, we're going to complete the square. And how would we do that? Well, let's see. We'll do f of x is equal to x squared plus 6x. We leave our space, minus 5. And if you will recall, let's see, of course we know that our perfect square is gotten by doing b over 2 squared. And in this case, our b term is 6. And we know that 6 over 2 is really 3, and 3 squared is 9. So we're going to write plus 9. And don't forget, because we added 9, well, of course, we're going to subtract 9 to keep it balanced. And now we can go ahead and kind of finish this off. We know that we have f of x is equal to parentheses x. And remember, when taking this perfect square, all we have to do is divide our b term by 2. 6 divided by 2 is 3 squared. And then this converts into a perfect square. Now, of course, negative 5 and negative 9 will give us negative 14. Okay, now we are not trying to find the vertex. We are trying to solve for x. So how do we solve quadratics for x? Well, don't forget, we always set it equal to 0. So we'll say 0 equals parentheses x plus 3 squared minus 14. And the question becomes, how do you solve for x? Well, think way back. We always start by solving by getting rid of our addition or subtraction. The opposite of minus 14, oh, and by the way, if it helps you to draw the brick wall, you can draw the brick wall. The opposite of minus 14 is plus 14, and we'll add 14. And check it out, guys. We'll have 14 is equal to x plus 3 squared. Now I'm going to pause this and clean this up just a little bit. Go ahead and make sure you have all your notes. Okay, now we have 14 equals parentheses x plus 3 close parentheses squared. And I want y'all to think way back. How in the world can you get rid of a square? Well, I hope you would remember from our lessons a long time ago, you do this by taking the square root. Remember, the opposite of a square is a square root. And what we do to the right, we do to the left. Now from here, what is this actually going to give us? Well, the square root of 14, you would go to Desmos, or you could use your phone calculator, it doesn't really matter, is 3.74, and I'll just round to 2 decimals. So we'll say 3.74 is equal to x plus 3. Now here is where you are going to make a huge mistake. This is not just 3.74. When we take the square root of anything, we're saying what two numbers multiply together to be, well, in this case, 14. Well, it's not only 3.74 times 3.74, approximately. You could also do negative 3.74 times negative 3.74. Remember, a negative times a negative is a positive. So how do we reconcile this? We say that it is plus or minus 3.74. And this is your first time seeing this. Now, how do you solve something with a plus or minus? Well, the way that we do this is we actually write this twice. We'll say we have a positive 3.74 is equal to x plus 3. And let's use a different color to really distinguish this. We also have a negative, remember it's plus or minus, negative 3.74 is equal to x plus 3. Okay, now in both cases, whenever you get over the initial shock of this, it becomes pretty easy because we're simply going to subtract 3 from both sides. So what is 3.74? 3.74 minus 3. Well, that's going to give us 0.74 is equal to x. That's one of our x values. And what if we subtract 3 over here? Okay, well, what is negative 3.74 minus 3. Well, that's going to give us negative, here, let's see, negative 3.74 minus 3 will give us negative 6.74 is equal to x. And so check it out, guys. This is why quadratics have two solutions, because ultimately you're essentially taking the square root somewhere along the way, and when we take the square root, it's going to create a positive and negative of the same value. All right, let's try one more of these just so you can really get the hang of it. Okay, here in example 2, we want to solve for the x-intercepts, or we want to solve for the solutions, or we want to solve for the roots. Remember, when you're solving a quadratic, the places where it crosses the x-axis, those can be called x-intercepts, solutions, or roots, or we could even call them zeros. They have 4 different names for the same thing. So if I ask you to find x-intercepts, solutions, roots, or zeros, I'm just asking you to solve for x. Okay, so let's go ahead and do this by completing the square. So we can, right off the bat, we can say, okay, f of x is equal to x squared plus 3x. I leave my space for my perfect square and scoot my negative 7 to the side. I know that here I'll be using our formula, b over 2 squared. Squared. And remember, in this case, our b term is 3. 3 over 2 squared. Now, I have held off from using odd numbers because they're a little bit trickier. And my trick for you is I want y'all to convert these to decimals. So for instance, 3 divided by 2 as a decimal, y'all know this, is 1.5. And what is 1.5 squared? Well, that's going to be 2.25. And so we can say plus 2.25. Now remember, if we add 2.25 to the right, we also have to subtract 2.25 from the right to really balance this out. And then here's where students also get really tripped up. Whenever it's an odd number or a decimal, you're thinking, Mr. Hastings, I don't know two numbers that add up to be 3 that are the same and multiply to be 2.25. Well, guys, remember, what's the trick? Always divide your b term by 2 when writing your perfect square, and 3 divided by 2, well, we already know that. It's 1.5. Now from here, negative 7 minus 2.25, negative 7 minus 2.25 will, of course, give us negative 9.25. Now notice, this is where students sometimes get confused. We're not finding the vertex, we're solving for the x-intercept, solutions, roots, or zeros. Here we're simply going to set this equal to 0. And so now we have 0 is equal to x plus 1.5 squared minus 9.25. And now we're just solving our normal way. We know that we get rid of our subtraction first by adding. So I'll add 9.25 to both sides. And 0 plus 9.25 is, of course, 9.25 is equal to x plus 1.5, that whole thing squared. And think back, how in the world do you get rid of a square? Well, of course, we're going to take the square root of both sides. And here's where you're definitely going to need a calculator, because the square root of 9.25 is a tricky number. It's going to be plus or minus 3.04 is equal to x plus 1.5, and just x plus 1.5. Remember, our square and our square root canceled each other out. Now from here, this is really the only new thing that y'all are learning. And let me go ahead and clear this up so we can see this nice and neat. Okay, so how would I do this if I were y'all? How would I go from plus or minus 3.04 equals x plus 1.5 and solve it? Well, of course, you have to write this twice. 3.04, that's the positive version, is equal to x plus 1.5. And we need our negative 3.04 is equal to x plus 1.5. Notice everything on the right stays the exact same. And how do you get rid of a plus 1.5? Well, minus 1.5. Minus 1.5. And from there, we would say x is equal to 3.04. Let me do this right. 3.04 minus 1.5 is 1.54. That's one of our solutions. And negative 3.04. Once again, we will subtract 1.5 minus 1.5. So minus 1.5 will give us negative 4.54 is equal to x. So remember, these always have two solutions, and if you're not writing a plus or minus after you take your square root, that's where you're making your mistake. Alright, I hope this helps, and I'll see y'all in our next video.